You're now live.
We went live. It was faster today. Good afternoon, committee. This is an unenviable position. Being between a committee and break is worse than being the last speaker before lunch. But we are also into crunch, so I'm trying to make some progress here. We did make progress yesterday. This is Senate Finance. It is February 25th. And we're going to start out first today. I'd like to walk us through, and I gather Ruth has asked Jim to do an updated draft for us based on some of the discussions we've had. Plus, we will have a discussion of the letter, the recommendation that came to the House. I think that will be from the Ed Committee. I think that'll be the first thing that we'll walk through. I'd like to get this as close to wrapped up as we can. The schedule is still kind of iffy when we come back. Right now, we have not scheduled anything for Thursday or Friday, waiting to see what the floor schedule is and what we get finished or not. If you're not going to be in person in the committee, let me and Faith know. So we just know I'm probably going to, I don't think I've emailed Bloomer, but I would like to limit the committee to 10 or 11 people. Let staff stay remote, let witnesses stay remote, and do as much remote as we can with as many of us as come back are there. I'm planning to be there. I'm thinking most members of the committee will probably be there, and that some of you have been in and out, but some may not. So just let me know if you don't plan on being there. And if anybody has any objection to that first week. I'm not sure what they've arranged for the public, but it will all be live streamed. So I'm hoping at least until we get our feet on the ground and get moving that we can have as few people as necessary in, but we can make accommodations as we go. So just let me know if anyone is not happy. I'm getting some people have to leave. I know Senator Brock might be a few minutes late. He's got a meeting conflict. And so we're going to start with Jim. It was in and out. There you are. Jim, can you walk us through the section or the draft language of what the recommendations the House sent to us?
Sure. Would you prefer to start with the bill language or the letter you received from the?
Does the bill language reflect the letter?
It does.
Then let's do the bill language.
Okay. So let me just pull this up. If I could share the screen. There it is. It's right here. Why is it over there?
Okay, committee, I have to make you go away, so holler if you want to speak.
Okay, can you see this?
That's great. Yep, that's
a bit too
good.
big. Let me get this.
Gee, this is only a 35-page bill.
So for the record, Jim Damery as counsel, we're going through draft 3.12. I'm not sure it's 1.12, but 3.12 of this draft committee bill. I'll take you through the changes, but I'll start with the ELL pieces. So I'll come back to the beginning to go through the rest. So the first recommendation that came from Senate Education was to add a weight for ELL students. So in the weighting section, which is coming up, you'll see that there's language now. The first step is for the secretary to identify students who are ELL learners. And then the second step is to apply the weight. And that,
Excuse me, Jim,
Yes.
the page is not moving as you're speaking.
oh, I had that problem before. Let me stop sharing and refresh. I'm not sure what's going on.
Okay, and I am going to try and print this out so I can.
So it's back up. Do you see it moving now?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, now
Good.
it's moving.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we are on page 10 of the bill, and we're adding a weight for EOL students. And the language is here. It says the secretary shall next apply a weight for ELL pupils. Each ELL pupil included in long-term membership shall receive an additional weighting amount of 2.49. That's the weight part.
Okay,
And then there's a grant part too. So coming up to a new section, here it is. Okay, so you have a new section being added in section 7 to Title 16, 4013. First, it defines EOL students who are English language learners for whom English is not their primary language. And then it defines ELL services, means instructional and support personnel and services that are required under the Equal Education Opportunities Act for ELL students and their families, which shall include licensed teachers, paraprofessionals, translators, and cultural liaisons, high quality instructional materials such as books and digital resources, family support and education with assistance from cultural liaisons who speak the students' native language, and community outreach, education, and engagement. And then section B is what's required to be offered. So it says each school district shall provide ELL services as just defined, budget sufficient resources through a combination of state and federal categorical aid and local education spending to provide ELL services. Report expenditures on ELL services annually to the Agency of Education through the financial reporting system as required by the agency, and report on educational outcomes of ELL students as required by the agency. The next subsection is around the agency support and quality assurance. So it says the Agency of Education shall provide guidance and program support to all school districts with ELL students as required under federal law, including professional development for instructors and support personnel, information on best practices, and WIDA language and development standards, and prescribe, collect, and analyze financial and student outcome data from school districts to ensure that districts are provided high quality ELL services and expending sufficient resources to provide these services. And then D goes into categorical aid. So it says in addition to the ELL weight under section 410, which we just went through, a school district that has, as determined annually on October 1 of the year, 1 to 5 ELL students enrolled shall receive state aid of $25,000 for that school year, or 6 to 25 ELL students enrolled shall receive state aid of $50,000 for that school year. And then E is the appropriation section. It says annually the General Assembly shall include in its appropriation for statewide education spending and appropriations provide aid to school districts for EL services under this section. And then next is the payment section. So on before November 1 of each year, the state treasurer shall withdraw from the education fund based on warrant of the Commissioner of Finance and Management and shall forward to each school district the aid amount owed under this section. So that incorporates the recommendation of Senate Education.
Okay, committee questions.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yeah, okay, maybe you can take, well, let's hear the question, then we'll decide if we can take it down.
Yeah, I think I know the answer, but, and so now it's an embarrassing question because this is a significant change, but when we're describing the weights, Jim, there's first apply grade level weights, next apply weights for people from economically disadvantaged. Is there any impact, maybe this is a Brad James question, but is there any impact of the order of those determinations?
I don't believe so. I think the grade weights might need to go first, but everything else I think could be in any order. When I was drafting it, I didn't have in mind that the order made. I did not have in mind that the order made a difference.
That's kind of what I was hoping. Okay, thanks.
We can double check that with Brad.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Do you know Senator Hardy?
Yeah. So it used to matter because some of the weights were multiplicative and some of them were additive.
That's right.
The grade and the poverty weights were multiplicative. So they did the multiplication first and then added on top of that. So now that they're all additive, it doesn't matter as much. But I think that traditionally the grade weights have been applied first because those used to be multiplicative. And those are the ones that more or less every single district has, because almost every district has middle and high school. There are some just elementary districts, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So maybe committee, that was the big square box we've been waiting for. Is that what the committee would like? Is that okay? I was hoping we could just stick it in.
Yeah, in yesterday's draft, there was, or the last draft we were looking at, I think, I'm trying to find it here, where we talk about the need to have sort of an ongoing look at the weights.
Yeah, that's the advisory board. We'll get to that.
Okay, good, thank you.
I'm waiting for all my last of my 35 pages to print out so I can start marking it up.
Oh, that's your printer. I thought it was a train going by.
No, that's my
yard or
printer,
something.
and I think it's almost done. I hope. Okay, Jim, maybe we can go back. I'm not going to have to put paper in again. To 1. And we can start just walking through and see where we're in agreement. Perfect timing. I now have my copy, so I can mark it up. No, I don't. I have 5 more pages to go. I'm out of paper. Give me a minute. Okay, let's start walking through, and if I'm lucky, I won't have anything to mark on the first page.
Okay, we're on page 1. Page 1, just in the statement of
Wait,
purpose of the
Jim,
bill. Yes.
I'm sorry. Julia had her hand up, so I just wanted to give, I don't know if you
You
wanted.
can see people?
I can see people because I moved you all
Oh,
over.
let me see if I can. I shut most people out. Well, I don't see Julia.
Water.
But Julia, if you've got your hand up, you have a,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julia Richter with Joint Fiscal Office for the record. I just wanted to follow up to Senator Pearson's question as well as Senator Hardy's response, and just also add in that the way my understanding of the draft that I have in front of me, there's also the sparsity and school, small school weights. So while it doesn't necessarily matter mathematically, as Senator Hardy mentioned, when the weights are applied, that's sort of an if-then situation. So first you look to see if the school is sparsely, it's first the sparsity weight and then the small school weight applied, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. So we're on page 1 here. Let's go down. What do we, this is under page 6. So we added to support school food programs.
So there are still
Ah.
16 positions in this draft, but they've been rearranged a bit. So you'll see later on when we get to the section, but now you have one person to support school food programs and the development of the Universal Income Declaration form. You have 3 people to provide financial and day support to the agency and the Education Fund Advisory Committee. And you have, as before, 2 staff to support ELL services.
Okay.
So that I'm going to focus on the changed sections. Is that what you're?
Well,
wanna
we
walk through
haven't
the
been
entire
through
bill?
the whole bill, so I think we really need to kind of walk through the bill and just, we can do the 2,000-foot kind of view just to make sure that everybody is comfortable with what's in there. So,
Okay.
right.
Do you want me to review findings in detail, or do you want just to have those as?
All right. Here, this is redoing it. So we'll just let it go. So just committee, read through the findings, see if there's anything there. Brigham State, all right.
This kind of background, of course, how we
Yeah.
got here. So it's talking about our constitutional requirement to provide substantial equality of educational opportunity in Vermont. Talks about the importance of this in the changing economy. And then C talks about students come to school with different learning needs that have to be addressed. And then go into the history of some of the background acts, so 173, and then going into the report that came out of that from Tammy Colby, saying that the weights were outdated. And then Act 59 from last session that created the task force in their report. So that's broadly the findings. The goals are here. There are 5 goals. The big goal is to fulfill Vermont's constitutional mandate to ensure that all students receive substantial equality of educational opportunity throughout the state. And that specifically is designed to increase educational equity. I won't read all this, but improve educational outcomes, improve transparency, and enhance educational and financial accountability, and improve oversight of the K through 12 system. So those are the 5 goals broadly. Then we go into changes in the determination of weighted membership. So first, we're making some changes to the definition of long-term membership. So just to remind the committee, the way you come up with equalized pupils is you start with your average daily membership, which is just an enrollment count for the current year, and you average that with a prior year enrollment count, and you come up with what's called long-term membership. So it's really just an average of 2 years enrollment count.
Okay.
And then you weight that, and then you apply the equalization ratio, and you come up with the equalized pupils. So this is the second step. So after ADM, then you do long-term membership, and it's creating an exception usually it's just the 2-year average of ADM, but there's a small wrinkle that Brad uses to do the 2-year average for small school weights. He uses the past 2 years as opposed to the current year and the past year. So there's a slight language change there to account for that methodology. And then section 4 changes what was the poverty ratio, which is no longer relevant. Changes that to a definition of pupil from an economically deprived background. I'm on line 9. And that is a pupil who is eligible for free or reduced price lunch under the federal laws.
Okay.
So that's there. And then we have the Universal Income Declaration Form. And this states the intention of the General Assembly that the determination of whether a student is from an economically deprived background be changed from eligibility for free or reduced price school meals to a measurement determined by General Assembly, not lower than 185% of current year federal poverty level. Importantly, with data collected from a universal income declaration form. Mentions that the form is used by other states. It reduces stigma, and the agency is convening a working group on before October 1, 2022, including some stakeholders, to develop the new form to be ready for the 23-24 school year.
Okay, so this, when you first started reading about other states, I thought this was a standardized form, but this is a form that the Agency of Education will put together specifically for Vermont. It will be sent to schools and schools will send it home with children or mail it, or it's up to them.
I don't think I know the details yet of how it will be distributed.
Okay. But before any of that happens, the General Assembly has to set on the top of section 5 for eligibility meals measurement determined by the General Assembly. So we will have to do that next year based on what? And how will that get submitted to the General Assembly? Should we say the Committee on Education shall?
So, Madam Chair, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
this was just language that is establishing intent, I believe. So the measurement that is used in the form would be the same as the measurement that's used for free and reduced lunch, which is 185% of the federal poverty level. But if it's confusing, we can certainly take that out.
Well, it says meals to a measurement determined by the General Assembly.
Yeah, and I think that the intent there is that it could be we could set it at 200% of the poverty level, for example, but this would be saying it couldn't be lower than 185%, because
Okay,
that's
well,
the
it
free and reduced lunch.
probably would be good to set a number. I just don't want us getting back and having the schools send out all these forms and waiting for Bill to make it through the entire legislative process, you know, saying 185 or 200.
Mhm.
So if we just say in this bill, it shall be, then the General Assembly will have voted, and when the schools start moving, they'll know what they're moving with. Do we want to stick with the 185 to start with or up it, committee?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I guess that this section caught my eye in a similar but slightly different reason. Senate Ag had a lot of testimony when we were working on universal meals about the need for this form, and AOE and Hunger Free Vermont. It was broadly agreed this is the right way to go. So what I see here is a direction to get people who can figure out the details together and do that, and an expression of intention. And one of the questions is that I suppose it's implied is they would figure out if it's 185 or 187 or 200 or whatever the percent of poverty. But I guess I would hope that we would make it more explicit that we will shift once that work is done. We will shift, and Jim, that's not expressed here that I see. And baked into that would be us deciding or letting the working group figure out 185. But am I right that there's not an actual replacement? It's an expression of intent and setting up the scheme to replace it, but not automatic?
Well, the end here talks about a shall giving the working group for implementation for the 23-24 school year. That's more directive.
Well, then what if we in section 4 say, until, if we phase that out once this form is available, that would make sense to me. It doesn't answer the chair's question about 185, but it at least makes it in concert with those two sections.
Well, the form can go out. We just can't calculate the data in the form until we set the rate, right?
So,
But I would feel more comfortable if, rather than just say, well, there's all these interested people out there and they're working on setting the rate. Some committee in the legislature, and it would probably be the Committee on Education in discussion with all interested parties, would recommend a number or so, because this just, it doesn't say who's responsible for coming
Right.
back to the General Assembly and saying this is what the rate should be.
if I may, I think that for logistical and mathematical purposes, frankly, we need to start with 185%.
Yes.
Because that's how the weights have been calculated right now. If we change it to even 187% or 190% or 200%, we would have to recalculate the weights, and that would set everything back again.
No.
So my recommendation is I think what Senator Pearson was saying about tying section 5 and using that income form back to section 4, the 4001 paragraph 8, Jim, and that part at the end, line 17 through 19, where it says to use the school lunch, saying once the income form is developed, we would be using that instead of the school lunch. So that would tie that bow. And then the second thing would be, instead of having this language that says as determined by the General Assembly, just get rid of that and just say free and reduced meals measurement not lower than 185% of the current year federal poverty level, which would keep the weights consistent. Then if we want to consider in the future changing that, we could add that to one of the things that is recommended when the weights are recalibrated or recalculated, so that it could be part of that process
But what it says is not lower than. Does that mean some schools might calculate it? What I'm trying to see is who are we assigning the responsibility to set that rate?
We would just set it here and saying not lower than 185%.
But
And
not
so-
lower than doesn't set it. It gives a range.
Right, okay, you're
It-
fair. And we would just say that the income form, I guess we just say 185% at this point, and then give the put in the recalculation of the weights, the ability to change it in the future if it's necessary.
Yes, okay, that works.
Yeah,
So this
I agree.
keeps on a level playing field. So in here, we're just going to say, take out as determined by the General Assembly. And just say it's 185%. The General Assembly can always change it. And that may, all the weights, yeah, everything is equal in that. Okay. Okay, so it's just eligible for free and reduced meals. Yeah, we've got to reword that. It's free or reduced meals. If we do the universal income declaration, is that how we're calculating free and reduced meals?
Yes, and that's one of the nice things about this form is it could be used for both purposes.
Okay, but I think we need to make that clear that we're going to start out with the present calculations. Once those universal, and we're not going to get all of them. So we say a majority of the free and reduced lunch. I mean,
I think to me that the mandate here is not that every single person bring it back, but presumably the working group would also be engaged in how to get a successful return rate.
have we got a working group?
Well, it's AOE plus interested whoever's, right?
Yes, it's a working group, including school staff and hunger and nutrition experts.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Jim, do we give you enough to clean
Yep.
that up?
I think you did. Yep.
Okay. All right. All right, let's keep moving.
Okay. So we are now in section 6, and this is the big part here where we're changing the weights. So this is the amendment to 4010, termination of waived membership. And it's a step-by-step process. It's kind of like a recipe. So the first step is on before the first day of December during each school year, the secretary shall determine the average daily membership. And again, that's just a student enrollment count of each school district for the current year. The determination shall list separately resident pupils in pre-K, resident pupils in K through grade 5, resident pupils in grade 6 through 8, and resident pupils in grade 9 through 12. And then again, by the same timing, the secretary will identify resident pupils from economically deprived backgrounds. And then next, same date, the secretary will identify EOL students.
Okay, when he's determining 4018, that's using that either free or reduced lunch or the universal income declaration, right?
Correct. Yeah. However,
Okay.
that will be, yeah, correct.
Okay,
And then 4 is listing out school districts that have low population densities measured by the number of persons per square mile. and that's broken out by districts that have fewer than 36 persons per square mile, and districts that have 36 to 54, and districts that have 55 to 100. And that data will be based on the most recent U.S. Census data as provided by the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. And then the Secretary, by the same date, needs to list school districts that have one or more schools that have small school enrollment. So average 2-year enrollment of fewer than 100 enrolled pupils, or 100 to 250 enrolled pupils. And that's by school and not by district. And then this has a little bit of a funky definition. Rather than using long-term enrollment, the 2-year ADM average, this uses a 2-year average of the previous 2 years. And this is how Brad does it. So it's a little bit of an exception to the count here, but with the same purpose. So that was the second step. The third step, so the second step here is to determine long-term membership, which is simply taking the average current enrollment in these categories, averaging with the previous year. So that will be happening in B. And then the third thing is to add the weights. So this says the Secretary shall determine the weighted long-term membership for each school district. So 1, the Secretary shall first apply the grade level weights. So that is a negative 0.454 for pre-K, and then a positive 0.36 for grade 6 through 8, and positive 0.39 for grades 9 through 12. Then there's a weight for pupils from economically deprived backgrounds at 1.03. And then next there's a weight for ELL pupils, which is a weighting of 2.49. And then the weight for low population density school districts, it's 0.15, where the number of persons per square mile is 35 or fewer. 0.12, where it's 36 or more, but fewer than 56, and 0.07, where it's 56 or more, but fewer than 101. And lastly, the Secretary applies the weight for small schools. So it's conditional. So if the number of persons per square mile in a school district is 55 or fewer, and the school district has average enrollment of fewer than 100 pupils, then receives an additional weighting amount of 0.21, and that's only for the students in the small school. And if they have 100 or more but fewer than 251 pupils, then they get additional weight of 0.07 for each pupil in the small school. And then 6 just says that the school district's weighted long-term membership shall equal long-term membership as the average of 2 years, plus the accumulation of the weights assigned by the Secretary. So the whole thing accumulates under subdivision 6. Then we've taken out text, which is the old text about how weighting is done. So those are struck out. The hold harmless, which is a 3.5% decline, is still here, although later in the bill it is suspended for the transitional period. And it's the same. And then we have language about updates to the weighting factors, and it says it is the intention of the General Assembly to consider whether and how to update the weighting factors under subsection C of this section. It should say not less than, the V is a mistake, not less than every 5 years. And if they are updated, the implementation date for the updated weights be delayed by a year in order to provide school districts with time to prepare their budgets. Updates to the weighting factors may include recalibration, recalculation, adding or eliminates, or any combination of these actions. Then we're amending the very same section we just amended, but at a future date. So this doesn't come in until 2028. And what it's doing is, after the transition period, it is using a 3-year average of the equalized pupil count, rather than just the current year. So it's smoothing out the count going forward. And then we have this provision about prospective and conditional repeals. It says if before July 1, 2027, so 5 years out, the General Assembly has not revised the weighting factors to reflect changes in cost factors from which weights are derived, after receiving a recommendation of the Education Fund Advisory Committee to do so, then you're repealing the weights altogether. You're repealing the section 6A, which is the one that talks about using a 3-year equalized pupil average. So this is designed to force the legislature to take some action within 5 years, either update them or repeal this provision here.
Can we talk about that, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So maybe I'd ask Senator Hardy. I'm all for motivating the legislature to get itself into gear, but this does seem seems fairly intense. Can you just? I mean, we set it up for. Talk to me about the logic, if you could.
Sure. And Jim and I talked about this quite a bit to try to figure out how to create a mechanism that sort of forces the legislature to take action, because we can't bind a future legislature. But one of the reasons that we sort of got into this situation where the weights were really out of date is because we didn't do anything with them for a long time, except for one weight. To be fair to Brad James, we did change the grade level weight a few times at his recommendation, but the other ones we didn't. And so this would, the report authors recommended that the weights be recalculated or recalibrated every 5 years. And so this would force the first recalibration, because they were done in essentially we're putting them into place now. So this would be in 5 years. So it would force them to either recalculate them or recalibrate them, or get rid of this sunset saying, oh, we don't need to do it. And it would force the legislature to listen to the advice of this new Education Fund Advisory Commission, which is supposed to recommend the recalibration or recalculation of the weights. So that's why it's in there. I mean, obviously you can always repeal or repeal and just ignore it. And that's the other possibility. We couldn't figure out another way to sort of force the action of the legislature. There's the intent language, but that doesn't quite do it. So
what about the phase in? Any concern that I mean, I guess this does seem a little extreme to me, because they can just, if they want to ignore it, it's pretty easy. There are baked in interests who will make it harder to ignore, because we're setting up the evaluation. So to me, this is not, in some ways it's no big deal one way or another, but it's not as iron Loctite as we would think. But the 5-year thing, I guess, had you considered starting this in 10 years, starting to have fine, because we've got a phase in, then we're quickly getting a reevaluation and it's actually just 2 years, right?
Yeah, well, one of the problems is that the weights originally were calculated based on data from 2010 to 2018, I think. And so they already actually are out of date, and we recalculated them last fall, but that's a sort of more minor process than a full recalibration. And so we're already kind of in the place where we should be fully redoing them. And so, you know, I think it's sort of, if we wait even longer, they're gonna get older and older, is sort of my feeling. We will have, there is new data, things have changed already since the weights were created to begin with. And so if we don't have a mechanism to recalibrate them, they're going to get out of, they already will be out of date.
All right. Thank you.
We do a similar thing, I believe, with used to be the property tax rate, or the yield. I'm looking at Senator McDonald, but I believe if the legislature fails to set a yield, and when it was the tax rate, if we didn't set the tax rate, it reverted to the original $1.10. Am I correct in that, Senator McDonald?
You were correct about that. I couldn't answer the same question with the yield.
But if we don't act, it goes back to what the original yield was, and we've never gotten to a state tax rate of $1.10. So it automatically upped the taxes if we failed to act.
Yeah, and I think there's some provision.
You may be very well be correct. I cannot vouch for it. That's on me, not on you.
No, there is a provision related to the yield that I think if we don't change the yield every year, it goes back to the 2010 yield, I believe, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a similar provision about the yield that's a really dramatic thing that happens if we don't act. So there's precedent for this, even though it seems extreme.
It's making us take a painful decision, which may or may not negatively impact some of our constituents.
Right. And the reason that we left in the 3-year rolling average for the equalized pupil count, right now we don't have a 3-year rolling average. We left in the 3-year rolling average. So when there is recalculations or recalibrations, they automatically phase in without having to go back to 0 and rephase them in. Because the 3-year average sort of levels out the phase in of new weights. This is a 5-year roll-in because the change is so drastic. Hopefully changes in the future won't be as drastic and the 3-year roll-in will be sufficient.
If the population changes, it could be.
Sure, yeah, and then
yeah,
could change it again in the future, but.
Okay. So we're on section 6B, am I right, Jim?
Yep.
And that sets dates. Okay, what are we repealing?
You're repealing the whole weighting system.
Oh, that's the section where we repeal it. All right.
Yep.
Okay, then we're into section 7.
Yep, which we've gone through. That's the EOL provision that we went through earlier. Do you want to touch on that again, or should we keep
I
going?
think we can remember that long.
Okay. Okay, now we're into a different topic, which is the merger support. So this gets rid of the small school grants and keeps in though the merger support grants for districts that either voluntarily or were involuntarily merged. And that language is down here. So if you're voluntarily formed, you get your merger support grant. If you are involuntarily formed, you get a merger support grant. And they go away really only if the small school closes. But they don't get the grant if they get the weight. So it's either the grant or the weight, not both.
Okay, so they get the grant or the weight.
Correct. Yep.
All right.
Then we have just,
I'm sorry, and I'm not objecting to that, but I thought we were described, it had been described that everyone gets the grant, that you get, that the schools with smaller population get the grant and the weight. Am I just misremembering that, or have we changed?
You're
I think-
confusing the ELL stuff with the merger support. So this is
Oh,
about,
oh, yeah, yep,
yeah,
absolutely.
this
Thank
is
you.
about districts that have merged under Act 46. So they can't get the ELL, or sorry, now I'm doing it. They can't get the merger support grant and the small schools weight. If they qualify for the small schools weight, they don't get the grant, and they get the grant only if they merged.
I had eggs for lunch and I still have some on my face. Thank you.
All right.
so section 9 is merely a conforming change to get rid of the reference to small school support. Section 10 is again a conforming change to get rid of small school support. Section 11 is transition. So first is A is around the 3 fiscal years, the first 3 fiscal years of implementation. The equalized pupils will be a 5-year average. And then in the 4th year, it will be a 4-year average. And then in the last year will be a 3-year average. And then that will continue thereafter as well, the 3-year average.
So this is, we saw that laid out in a grant in a draft, a graph the other day. Okay, and this is our transition plan. Okay, and this is where we thought it might cost money. So is Julia still with us? I can't see people. Julia, are you still here? Don't hear her. So we'll have to get a fiscal note on this just to see if it is. So this
Are you
is
talking about the phase in of the?
Yeah, this
the-
transition plan is where we thought we might actually, because the idea is the more we give, the less they raise in taxes. But depending on how we transitioned it, we just wanted to make sure, we just would need a fiscal note as to what kind of impact that could have on the grand list or the ed fund.
Right, it wouldn't happen until the following fiscal year, so none of this
Right,
would.
but
start
just
in the
just a
year.
fiscal note, just to be sure. Okay. Okay, Jim, I think we can go unless there's other questions.
So section 12 deals with transition as well. So this is suspending the excess spending penalty for the transitional years, the 5 years, and also suspending the hold harmless provision, the 3.5% hold harmless for that same 5-year period.
Okay, and did we get any fiscal notes on any of this?
Madam Chair, I think this is
Is
the part.
excited about the excess spending threshold as the other body. So I'll ask joint fiscal to take a look at it.
Hi, Madam Chair.
You're there, okay.
I'm sorry, I briefly had a phone call I had to attend
That's
to, but
fine.
with regards to a fiscal note, we have not prepared a fiscal note
Yeah.
at this point because the bill is still being ironed out, but we are following it closely, and I'm working on some analysis and happy to provide analysis for
That
the
would be
committee.
good. We're looking at section 11 and 12, which is the transition, rolling average, and the, I don't know if suspension of the hold harmless, because that depends on who votes what, the excess spending, but any thoughts you can give us or predictions on that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to look into that. I guess the challenge that we're having at the moment in terms of the modeling is just all of these moving pieces and
Right.
all of the details and all of the considerations and the data that we're working with. But to the extent that we can prepare a fiscal note, I'm of course more than happy to do so, and also happy to come in and talk to the committee about what some of these transition costs may look like, although there are a number of assumptions that we're working with. So it's,
I think we understand we've got 100 moving parts, and it's going to come down to what the people at the local level vote eventually. But just any red flags that you see, something that could have, major impacts on the ed fund, that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to do that. And we'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Okay, that's good. But it has to be by the end of, you got 2 weeks.
Yep.
This has to be out by crossover.
Yeah, that deadline is on our
stop in
timeline.
the other body. So anything that we miss.
It will also go from here to approach. So they're obviously
They will look at
going
it
to want to
too.
be interested in fiscal.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh, this will go to approps.
Yeah, there's positions in here. There's
Okay, yeah, then
advisory
we've got to
meetings
get this out of here ASAP.
today, Madam Chair.
If we could, it would be good. All right, let's keep going. Maybe we can do that. I haven't got any red flags on my paper yet.
Okay, so
So-
section 13, sorry, should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, so section 13 is a requirement for the Vermont Center for Geographic Information to assist AOE in determining the number of persons per square mile. And then we come to evaluation and reporting. So I'll read through this, describe it here. So it says on before December 15, 2029, the state auditor shall submit to the House, to various committees, including you, a performance audit conducted under generally accepted government auditing standards that identifies the successes and failures of the implementation of this act, including whether and the extent to which each of the Act's 5 goals under Section 2 of this Act have been met. If a goal has not been met, the reasons why and recommendations to achieve that goal, and the fiscal impact of the Act, including the cost of implementation. And then it says, on or before December 15, 2024, the auditor, AOE, and the new committee shall jointly agree to the statement of work for the audit, including how to measure whether the Act's 5 goals have been met, and submit the statement of work to you, so you have a chance to review it. And then it goes on to say that the audit should be carried out by the state auditor or a contracted designee, but has to be someone who would be independent. And then it says that the audit shall cover the period beginning on July 1, 2024 and ending on June 30, 2028. So that's the entire 5-year implementation period. And therefore, after that's over, they have 1.5 years to do their audit work. And it says the audit shall take into account such metrics as the auditor, the agency, and the committee jointly determine appropriate, which shall include a number of things that Rep. Hardy went through earlier. So I won't repeat this all, but a number of metrics here are listed. And Then we move on to a different topic, which is a new committee. So should I pause here?
Okay, committee. Thoughts on this section? It's okay?
I definitely have a question.
I do
Well,
too.
but I'm
Okay,
glad to see Senator Brock because my question is for him. So I'll let him go first.
okay. Senator Brock, you have joined us. I can't see you.
Yeah, well, the issue in all of this is we're doing all kinds of stuff and we're spending all kinds of money and we're making all kinds of changes. And the real question is what we're doing working? And I am concerned about how long this is going to take. But, you know, realistically, the auditor can't audit something that hasn't been done. And so you have to have something done and you have to have an agreement as to between the parties as to what is done and what is it that ought to be measured. And I guess I'm satisfied in the arrangement that of the parties that are involved in this, particularly where it's done out in the open. And so any of us who have disagreements about the methodology will certainly have a chance to speak up. One of the things, though, that might be useful as we look at the various things that are going to be reported on in terms of, and they're listed here in the bill, it would be great if those things, if it were clear that those things would be available to the public within a reasonable period of time after being calculated on an ongoing basis. That way, those of us who are armchair auditors can be looking at what's happening as it's happening and raise red flags before 2031 or whenever it is that the final report will be done. And that's what I would recommend, that we add something that these particular items will also be publicly released on an annual basis or as reasonable or as quickly as possible after their collection and completion.
Okay, I'm looking at the list. Senator Hardy, did this come up? Do you know? I
Yeah,
think
so
most of these are reported.
yeah, so the things that are on this list, all of them are publicly reported right now and measured. Most of them are available on the Agency of Education's website, except for obviously the academic, extracurricular, and support services across school districts. That would be some data that would have to be collected, and I mean that's available at an individual district level. I'm not sure that's collected on a statewide level at this point, but everything else is, I believe, and is available either from the Agency of Education. Some of them are the TOEFL exam, I believe, is a federal exam, but the Agency of Education has those scores. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey is on the Department of Health's website and is publicly available. So all of these things already are available. And that's one of the reasons I chose them, is because they're not new measures.
Could we add or any other, this is being set up by a committee, right? An auditing.
The measure, the
combination.
specific metrics would be recommended by those three parties.
Yeah, I've thought, or
The
any
auditor,
other
the agency, and
measure
the
they
committee.
thought might be valuable.
Yes, I think we could add that if it's not already in. Is it in there already, Jim, or?
I couldn't hear the question. I'm sorry. There are a number of people speaking.
Could we add or any other measure the parties think would be relevant?
Yes, that's
Wow.
here now. So on page
is.
26, let me go back there. So-
Okay, I'm on 27, all right.
So 18 through 20, the auditor should take into account such measures as the auditor, AOE, and committee jointly determine
Okay.
appropriate, which shall include.
Okay, well, we could, how about include but not limited to?
That's
I want to make
always,
sure that if they go through that and say, you know, and start talking to school boards and say, well, I'm concerned about the kid that, and we've got more than a few that need so much help that we have succeeded if we keep that kid in school. We have succeeded, maybe that'll show up in standardized tests, but I just want to give some flexibility in there for these. I suppose they have it, but
When from a drafting standpoint, the way we draft at least, include always means it's not exclusive. You can always do more.
okay, it does
so,
mean but not limited to.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good then.
Well, the question that I raised, Madam Chair, was whether or not we should explicitly state that the metrics that are going to be used for this evaluation by the auditor over time, as they are available on an annual basis, shall be made available to the public. In other words, so that somebody who is following this can actually look and see
Yeah.
what's happening in each of these areas. If the material is in fact being collected now, that shouldn't be a burden.
Yeah, it is being collected. That's why
But
the
you go
committee
you go
chose
try to
them.
find it.
So who would we charge with
I would say that
publishing?
the Agency of Education would be the responsible party for ensuring that that gets done.
Could we say that the Agency of Education shall post?
It's already posted on their website. They have a website with data. You can go and get all of this on the website. So I mean, we can certainly say it, but I think it's already there. I mean, I went and looked at all of this when I was coming up with this list to make sure that it was already collected, because I didn't want to overburden the agency. I didn't want to.
Oh, that's my point. If it's no burden, it shouldn't be a problem to say so.
We
But
can
if
certainly say
you
it,
don't say
Senator
so,
Brock.
then
It's already
what's
on the
there today
website.
may not be there tomorrow, or the year after, or the year
Okay.
after that.
So I think it's easy enough to say that the Agency of Education shall publish the standards on their website, or shall publish
Annually.
this list annually on their website.
Is it published annually? I feel like the risk assessment one might be every other year.
Yeah, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is a Department of Health thing,
Yeah.
and it's every other year. And also, it also takes them, once they do the survey, it takes a year to get the data out there. So, you know, there's a lag because of getting data sorted through and cleaned and all that. So
I think just shall report it on their website, which would prevent them, or shall report updated versions on their website.
Regularly reported.
Yes,
There
there
you
you
go.
go.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
So-
So we're through page 27.
Well, sorry,
Oh,
Madam
Senator
Chair, but
Pearson, we're not
my-
through 27.
we're real close.
I got to check my agenda and see. Oh, we got to get enough time left to do cannabis. So keep moving.
I wouldn't want to interrupt people from doing cannabis.
No, I didn't think so.
2020. So I guess we're charging the auditor, has to do this, has to work with folks, the agency and the committee to do this. And then, but is there somewhere where it then happens again? Or is this just a one-time thing?
that is a really good question. It is a one-time thing.
It is a
We could
one-time
make-
thing.
We could make it an every 5-year thing or something like that. I think that would, or recommend regular audits after this. This is a pretty heavy lift, so maybe not this full thing every 5 years, but a smaller version.
I wouldn't recommend making it a regular thing, because this is a one-time thing, because it's dealing with a new program and it's dealing with the analysis of something that's brand new. This may not be the same standard and detail that you would use to audit an ongoing program. And so I'd be a little bit hesitant to just simply put it on an automatic repeat.
Okay.
But I think that we got plenty of time to deal with. We don't have to deal with that today.
Okay.
We
And
may
then
well have changed the weights.
We've got years to do it.
No, that's fine. And then the audit is to be conducted under the standards. I'm looking now for that language, whatever, you hear them all the time for
Yeah, generally accepted,
generally accepted.
government
And then,
audit auditing standards, GAGAS.
and I guess I don't think this is a big deal, but I'd be curious what you think, Sarah Brock. Page 26, we make it clear who the auditor may not contract with to do it. Now, I understand, I think we're sort of saying you can't go to the very people that we've depended on to design this new system and have them evaluated. I'm sure they would say it's doing great. No, they wouldn't. They have integrity, but
Yeah.
that's the risk. But I'm not aware of, I guess it's almost not worth the question, but wouldn't the standards that the auditor applies to anything already preclude that? And I'm just kind of curious. It jumped out to me.
In theory, it would. Yes, it would. You know, realistically, they are likely going to go to an auditing firm, a firm that is in the business of doing audits, as opposed to the kinds of folks that we have in the design process of this program. This is an auditor's job, someone who knows what generally accepted government auditing standards are and produces a report accordingly under those standards. So this, you know, the issue of independent may be superfluous, but we wanted to make it clear that this is something that is in fact independent, and that was the only message there.
Okay, but does this preclude whoever's doing the audit from talking to the very people that helped design it? Because that
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. In
All right,
fact, I
thanks.
would expect that they would.
Yeah, I would hope so too. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Who's paying for the audit? Money
well-
is so much fun.
That's a good question. I mean, we could ask them to tell us how much it's going to cost, because it doesn't happen for quite a few years. So
Okay.
it doesn't happen until 2028. So we certainly
All
don't
right.
have to budget
I mean,
anything now.
just what I'm knowing about audits, it won't be cheap. Because this
Probably not.
isn't just looking at the books. This is looking at student performance. This is looking at, did we switch all this money around and the kids aren't doing any better than they did 10 years ago? So it's,
Well, until the three groups get together and define the scope of work and what the audit consists of, you can't estimate a cost now
Right.
but by any means.
I just want to make sure, yeah, and I'd be very hesitant to say the funds would come out of the ed fund, because by 2028, the ed fund may be in a very different position. So, okay. All right. We can keep going.
Okay.
Go on to the advisory committee.
Yeah, we're in the advisory committee on page 28. So section A creates the advisory committee, and membership has not changed. So Commissioner of Taxes or Secretary of Education or designee, and then 5 members of the public appointed by different parties or different people, all with expertise in financing.
Do we really think we have that many people in Vermont with expertise in ed fund financing? I mean, what is expertise? And is Senator McDonald an expert in ed fund financing? Or it sounds good, but are we thinking of an accountant? Are we thinking of a school board member? What was the task force? What kind of person was the task force thinking of?
I think what we were hoping is people that have had more ongoing ability to engage in education finance conversations than your average legislator who is trying to do 8 million bills at the same time or keep track of everything. So it could be a school board member. Certainly there are school board members who are very well versed in education finance. It could be former legislators who have worked on education finance. It could be professors or academics who do it, accountants or people who have financial expertise. So I think it's a fair question about, how many people have deep expertise in our particularly super complex system, but there certainly are people who have more expertise than the average legislator in sort of looking deeply at the education fund.
Okay.
I guess it's in the eyes of the beholder or in the eyes of the appointer, I suppose, to define expertise as well.
Yep. Okay.
Well, when I was testifying as an expert witness, it was usually defined as someone from more than 50 miles away who has a dark suit.
Well, this is Vermont. I guess we could find 50 people with dark suits. Okay, let's keep going. The membership.
Madam Chair, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
you might be an expert,
on-
but I don't know if you have a dark suit, Senator.
If I had one, I probably wouldn't wear it. We have people, whether it's the School Boards Association, the Superintendent's Association. Perhaps the most important recent development and expertise on this was the committee that was assembled and has worked in the last several weeks. They have brought more legislators into being knowledgeable about stuff. Those of us that were around 20 years ago have been gradually forgetting. So I don't think we do a lot of good by creating simply a number of another additional committee. But this last group has created a freshman class that's going to go on to of knowledgeable people that's going to be doing us good for the next several years. That for sure.
Nothing precludes legislators being appointed.
Thank you, Senator.
So we will see who's here to be appointed. All right, are we going? We're down to powers and duties.
We are. So
right.
the powers and duties are to make recommendations each year by January 15 to you regarding updating the weighting factors, which may include recalibration, recalculation, adding or eliminating weights, or any combination of these actions as necessary. Changes to or the addition of new or elimination of existing categorical aid as necessary. The property dollar equivalent yield, the income dollar equivalent yield, non-homestead property tax rate, excess spending threshold, and the amount of the stabilization reserve. So those are annual recommendations. About two of them are as necessary, which are the
Okay,
right. And then, but then it says in 2, the committee shall recommend updated weights and categorical aid at least every 5 years, which may include a recommendation not to make changes where appropriate.
okay, I guess my question is with the section above that, because they can recommend whatever they want, but the property debt value equivalent, the income dollar, those are all just arithmetical calculations depending on the budgets. So, and that's, we have to set the yield rate, but we can't set it wherever we want. It is set based on school spending, reserves. And I'm not sure that having a committee have to come together once a year. To me, this is housekeeping stuff. It's just saying, this is what it is. And so that's what the equivalent yield is. This is what the schools are spending. I would rather, if we're looking at them as having expertise, maybe recommending any change in the new or eliminating existing. Yeah. That is good. Categorical aid is not automatically set, but the other ones, perhaps any changes they might recommend to the way we calculate. Senator McDonald.
Madam Chair, the system we have now has many parts that self-regulate, and that's one of the things that is repeated over and over again as being why it's lasted so long. Right now, I am reminded that one of the things that does not self-regulate is the percentage of Vermonters who pay based on their household income on their local education taxes. And I have asked 4 or 5 times this year on what we be told what the current percentage of Vermonters pay based on their household income. We've heard numbers like from the 60s to the high 70s. And I think Senator Hardy gave us a number last week, which I think she refined and came back with yet a more precise number. But we still don't have that number because that's the sort of thing that's difficult to calculate and we haven't calculated it and acted upon it in over a decade or so. So if this committee is trying to solve that sort of a problem, maybe it's useful, but it would seem to me that we should be able to ask for that number on any given year and have it given to us within days. And we've been in this session now, for the last 2 years, and we haven't gotten that number from anybody yet. So,
well, Senator,
that's a long way
think,
of saying, Madam Chair, what's that number?
Fine. I think Senator Hardy gave you the number that was given to the committee. If you would like a direct number, have you directly sent an email to Joint Fiscal and asked for that number?
I've asked the committee repeatedly to ask for that number.
Why don't you send an email over and ask for that number? But while we're doing this, you're right. I mean, the property equivalent, the income equivalent, that all gets set, but it gets set on it's a calculation unless I'm mistaken. But a better thing might be we have adjusted the income level upwards. We have adjusted the home value. We have not adjusted the home values upward. And this is all given the present taxing structure. But given the inflation so we might want to put those recommendations in there, the home value, the income level, any adjustments to those things which do change over time. And we could even ask for a recommendation in updating, I don't know what we call the circuit breaker, but it went from 35,000 to 47, where you get both state and local taxes capped.
Yes, and it was put in place in the early 80s. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's been adjusted a couple times. So, Madam Chair, I think Faith is listening, and I'm going to ask her to ask JFO for that number on behalf of the committee. And maybe she send that over this afternoon. But the point I was trying to make is, if we as a Finance Committee need to take a look at that dollar figure, which doesn't change automatically, periodically,
Yes,
and change it when we think it ought to be changed. And creating a committee to do that seems kind of cumbersome. We are the ones that ought to be making those recommendations today after consulting with superintendents, school boards, or whatever.
okay,
But
so
we haven't
this
been
is
doing it.
asking them. I think it would be more helpful if we have a group of experts in ed finance that we're paying to come together. I don't know how often. I'll let a Probst deal with that. Rather than ask them to talk about things that are presently just calculated. There's no policy in there. It's calculated. To recommend to us any changes in the appropriate income levels to to get the same equity as it, people are making more income. And we raised it to 90,000, right? And we've raised the home value and we've put a slope down. So I think those are things that would be helpful to get a recommendation as to when they should be upgraded or downgraded. And if the market crashes and everything goes down the tubes, we might need to downgrade all of that. So Senator Hardy, we just massacred your master.
No, it's totally fine. So the C, D, and E, those three things, I think, those were, so I heard you loud and clear that, and others about the December 1 letter. So we took that out. So this committee would no longer do it would stay the same as currently. Tax would do that. So I think those three things, C, D, and E, are sort of leftovers from when the vision was that this group would do the December 1 letter. So I agree that those make sense to take out. And I like your suggestion about having this group do sort of bigger picture stuff. And the other thing I would sort of add to the list is our previous conversation on the poverty percentage. That we, remember the whole conversation we had earlier about 185%.
Yes.
And if we wanted to change that at any point, they could make the recommendation. The income levels for the income tax portion, I think this is good. And if you have a list, I can work with Jim to put it in there when we do another draft.
We'll get, I'm sure Julia can get us a list as to what the official terms are. And we can get those in. I hear the bells are ringing, which means our next set of witnesses on cannabis are showing up, and we have not. I'm only through 29 pages. What else have we got to go through here?
I can take you through it quickly.
Okay, let's go through this quickly. I'll be quiet and I think we've been through the heavy lift stuff, but.
I think, yeah, I agree. So I did put in the appropriation for here, and therefore I had to put some number of meetings in per year up to. So I put 8. I'm not sure what the right number is, but some years it might be.
Skip over that because appropriations.
Okay. Okay, good.
They're going to deal with it.
16 is unchanged. It's a collaboration between AOE and JFO, MOU on the data models and other information needed to update weighting factors, hosting the models on the websites, and on the website, hosting the models, updating them as necessary, and then recommending the recalibrated weights. So that is unchanged. Staffing is changed. So again, we have 6 positions, 2 for EOL, 1 for school food programs, and to help develop and maintain the new Universal Household Income Declaration form, and 3 for financial and data analysis for AOE and the committee.
Okay.
And then we've got only technical and conforming changes, and these are very technical. So just taking out a few of the excess spending categories that aren't being used in numerous years. So one's about a merger of a school district with 20 fewer students. One is dual enrollment, which is not funded through school different budgets anyway. Technical change here, just equalized pupils, clarify what year it's for. Technical change on the school board, again, just making the correct cross-reference. And then the effective dates, which go on for a long time, but basically.
We don't need to change those, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
This
it.
is one bill we have. All right. Committee, are we comfortable with this? We can get a final draft and vote it out when we get back and get it over with a little leeway for approps. Does this work? So we'll let Jim get a clean draft. And we'll be ready to vote that out when we get back. All right.
Get back meeting Tuesday or meeting today?
Tuesday, I think. That might be a little much to ask Jim to get it done.
That
Because
sounds
we've also got the cannabis bill, and I'd like to get that voted out if at all possible. So we are going to go on to H701. This is the cannabis license fee bill. And Anthea is here, and Bryn, and I'm not sure. Bryn, do you want to kind of go first and set the table? And just, we're putting
Sure.
this on fast track, so let us know.
I'd be glad to. So good afternoon, committee. For the record, Bryn here from the Cannabis Control Board. I know that Anthea has a draft for you, or the House passed version of the bill for you to look at, and she will probably do an excellent job doing a walkthrough of that. So I won't try and do that for you, but I will provide a little bit of background for you. This committee, I was here in this committee a few weeks ago talking briefly about the Cannabis Control Board's October 15th report. I did not give you a full walkthrough of that report, but I did give you a summary. If you remember, that is the report that put forward the board's proposed licensing tier structure and the corresponding fees. And you'll probably remember that that report provided two fee structures. There was a proposal A and a proposal B. And the reason that we did it that way is because our enabling legislation tasked the board with coming up with a fee proposal that covered the cost of the board to operate. And so that was proposal A, which provided some higher fees that would have covered the board's budget. But we also provided a proposal B, which was an alternative, which really kept the fees competitive with nearby states and other markets that didn't provide for limited licenses. And in that October 15th report, the board recommended that the legislature adopt proposal B. We met with the House Ways and Means Committee in November, and they indicated that there was an interest in a proposal C, which offered sort of a blend of proposal A and proposal B. So in January, we provided that to them. We gave them a proposal C, which is what you see reflected in H701. And essentially what that fee structure is that it increases the price per square foot in a way that really keeps the lower tier cultivation licenses affordable and increases the cost of the middle and higher tier licenses progressively as you move up. And I want to note for the committee, just like I did in the House, that in this proposal, in what the fees that you see in H701 The fees for the middle and higher tiers, or really the upper tiers of the indoor cultivation, are generally higher as compared to other states. And it's the board's position that because they are so significantly higher than they are in other states, that may depress entrepreneurial interest in those tiers, which may result in lower projected fee revenue. And it may even result in insufficient product to meet consumer demand, given that those fees are relatively so much higher than they are in our neighboring states.
Okay.
Having said that, I know that this committee is on a fast track to move this bill. And as you know, the Cannabis Board has been quite diligent in maintaining the timelines that are set forth for us in statute. So we are happy to do whatever we can to support this committee moving the bill as quickly as you can. Having said that, there are 3 requests that the board has for changes to this bill. And these are entirely because the board is sort of building the plane as we fly it. We've been working on our rules during the legislative session. So the board did make some final decisions about tiering and the structure of the tiers in January, and put those in our final proposed rules, which are before LCAR. So there are a few additional mixed cultivation tiers that the board would like to add to the bill. And so that's the first change that we are requesting. The second change is that Act 62, which was a follow-up act to our enabling legislation, required that the board, in consultation with our advisory committee and the executive director of racial equity and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, develop some criteria for who would be considered a social equity applicant. And social equity applicants will have access to loans and grants from the fund, the Cannabis Business Development Fund, which is a fund that's created in Act 62 and administered by ACCD. So we provided in our report, in our October 15th report, we did provide to the legislature our the work that we did along with those stakeholders in developing the criteria for social equity applicants. In addition to that requirement in Act 62, the legislature also asked that we come up with a plan for reducing or eliminating license fees for individuals from communities that have historically been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition and personally impacted by cannabis prohibition. So our second request for H701 is that the legislature grant the board the authority to reduce or waive application and license fees for social equity applicants. The board has done a significant amount of work with our advisory committee, including one of the subcommittees of that advisory committee that was exclusively dedicated to social equity, in determining what the criteria should be and setting forward a schedule for fee reductions for social equity applicants. So the board has done that work, and we have a plan for reducing and waiving fees for these folks, and we do need the authority from the legislature to do those waivers and reductions. And the last request we have for 701 is quite technical in nature. There is a pre-qualification application fee, which you'll see in the bill as an intent to apply fee. And we are opening up that window for pre-qualification in just a few weeks. The fee in the bill for that is $500. And there is a provision that if you're an applicant who pre-qualifies with the board, if you apply for a full license within 6 months, you can have $500 reduced from your $1,000 application fee. And the request is just to extend that to 1 year. So if you pay that pre-qualification fee and get pre-qualified by the board, if you apply for a full license within a year, you can reduce your application fee by $500.
Okay.
So those are our 3 requests. I'm trying to go quickly. I imagine there are questions about all of this. So
I saw Senator Pearson's hand.
Yeah, but I don't need to go first, Madam Chair, and I've forgotten my question, I confess.
Okay, okay, I'm reading chats here. My question is, does Bryn have the language for what you would like us to add? And this is going to have to go back to the House. I suppose they can concur, but it does.
I did notify the House, to answer the second part of your question, I did notify the chair of the Ways and Means Committee of these requested changes because they were, the board kind of finalized its work after the committee had voted it out. So she is aware that we are asking for these changes.
Okay.
And in terms of, if you could see this language, I knew that you were interested in getting this out today. So the amendment has been drafted with the CCB's recommendations and it's been to the editors.
Okay, so we can see that and get that done. The chat I'm reading is from Faith, and it says that Graham has posted a fiscal note for us, but I think it would be good if he's available to have him here. We're putting this together quickly and we are missing people. So Senator Pearson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. A couple questions for Bryn. Am I right that the ability to waive the fee for social equity applicants is a request, so it's not in the House passed version? Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
I'm wondering if you considered, I'm open to that, but I worry about creative workarounds that businesses will bring forward, and I'm wondering if you would have considered a deferment. The fee waiving is usually presented in the sort of concept of a barricade or a blockade for folks who lack access to capital, and that I'm sympathetic to that. I think there's a lot to that argument, and the history of the war on drugs is very clear of who it's impacted in particular. But the fees are also how we deal with regulation, and they're meant to support our effort to bring this new industry above board. And so what about deferring it to a year later? They're presumably the business would be operating. The fee is actually not a huge cost. It would remove the impediment, but I should think would be a way of not, I don't know, just a protection a little bit for the state but also accomplishing some of the goals. Have you thought about that? Would you?
Certainly we would. I would just reiterate that this recommendation, first of all, the recommendation to the board came from the legislature that we come up with a way of a plan for reducing or waiving fees for these folks. And our social equity subcommittee of our advisory committee worked on this question. And it was, I think, partially because the Cannabis Business Development Fund was seen to not be funded appropriately to provide kind of meaningful economic opportunities for people who may not have the capital to get started, that the fee waiver may actually be significant for some folks. The schedule that they recommended for reducing fees was a full fee waiver in year one, and then a 25% reduction, 75% reduction in year two, 50% reduction in year three, and 25% reduction in year four. So is gradually decreasing in reduction over the first 4 years of operation. I think that they did consider whether it would be significant for folks to have access to a fee waiver, and I think they came to the conclusion that it would be. But that is, again, the work of our advisory committee, and I think the board is always happy to consider ideas coming from the legislature.
Thanks.
Senator Hardy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Two questions. Did we go over the language in this bill yet or not?
We have
I didn't think so. So Bryn, where in the bill is that the fee waiver language? Can you just tell me which section it is?
So it's not in the House passed version of 701, but Anthea has already drafted that amendment.
So these are amendments we are being asked to make to the House passed version. And it
Oh, I don't
might
see
be
it in
helpful to
your
go through the
amendment.
House passed version first. And then, but I want Bryn to be able to give us just kind of
Okay,
the
I have another
background.
question about a different fee, if that's okay, or should I wait?
Why don't we wait till we get to that fee and it's in the main bill?
I guess, since we haven't gone through it, I'm not positive what exactly is in the bill.
Well, why don't we get Anthea and let's go through it. And if it's not in this bill, you should find out where you're seeing it.
It's on the table. I of course looked at the table with the fees on it first because I
Okay.
love tables.
So
So
then it is probably in this bill. So Anthea, why don't you walk us through it?
Okay, so for the record, Anthea Dexter Cooper from the Office of Legislative Counsel. And I will put up H701 so we can all be on the same page. Faith has also posted a section by section summary. And on the second page of that section by section summary, there is a chart. The chart is also posted on its own. And those are the cannabis establishments for the non-medical side that are in H701 in chart form. I also just got Faith the amendment that would reflect what the Cannabis Control Board is now asking and a chart that shows a comparison there. But we'll see when we go through where that language would be.
Okay, can you make your print
Yes.
a little larger?
Is that better?
That's much better, yes.
Okay.
That's like
Great.
the top line at the eye doctors.
So a lot of what is happening here are technical and conforming changes that need to be made before we get to in section 7, the real meat of this bill, which is the cannabis establishment licensing fees. So section 846, this is existing law, adding to the section heading the word authority. Right now, it seems like section 846 has the fees in it, and it doesn't. It's just the authority to collect the fees, where the fees go, and what happens with the distribution to municipalities of a local licensing fee. So to be clear, subsection headings are added for A, saying that's authority, B, that's the Cannabis Regulation Fund, and C, this is the distribution to municipalities. It's adding in language referencing chapters 35 and 37. 33 is the commercial market, and then 35 and 37 are going to be the medical market. And at present, through to March 31st, the medical piece is under Title 18. Act 164 from a couple years ago slated that to repeal on March 1st and then get added to Title 7 on March 1st. Language in the Budget Adjustment Act pushes that out to July 1 of 2022, but this is accounting for the fact that eventually 35 and 37 should be containing the medical language, and the Cannabis Control Board will be collecting those fees as well. These are all really just small technical amendments.
All right, this is housekeeping.
Mm-hmm. Next one is very, very housekeeping. The definition of cannabis in 861 doesn't follow the format of definitions that we usually use. So instead of saying it shall have the same meaning, it has the same meaning.
Okay.
Super technical housekeeping. This one is slightly less super housekeeping-y, but if you'll remember back to Act 164, one of the things that happened sort of later in the game was the concept of an integrated licensee, which is one license to cover all of the different types of licenses that you can have: the cultivator, the retailer, the wholesaler, the testing.
And that's what the medical, the present medical marijuana people are, right? They're integrated licensees.
So you're going to want to talk to Bryn about this, but my understanding is that they will be able to become them, but they will not just automatically.
All right.
But they are,
That's correct.
but you're right, Madam Chair, they are currently integrated by our mandate that they be integrated. So it's always been a bit tricky here.
Okay. But they
So-
do grow, produce, or take the leaves and flowers and do what they do with them and then sell it, right? As a medical product. Okay.
So this is just adding to the definition of cannabis establishment that integrated licensees are also covered by the definition of cannabis establishment. Cannabis product, again, this is just that very technical definition to use the definition structure of has the same meaning as opposed to shall have. Subdivision 11, cannabis retailer, saying that cannabis retailers, and you'll see this language again when there's the part of statute that says what a retailer can do. Cannabis retailer includes the sale for cultivation, not just for consumption. So under the language in statute at present, a retailer would not be able to sell for purposes of then cultivating, only for consumption.
Okay, so this would be somebody who was selling either cannabis plants or seeds for cultivation?
Yep, and that tees up the next change, which is the addition of a definition of clone. And you'll see that that is then used later on to address the sale of clones.
Okay.
Madam Chair, could I jump
Yes.
in and ask a question of
Yes.
both? We'll start with Anthea. This has come up, actually came up in the testimony the other day on the farming, definition of farming bill.
Is that S-188?
Yeah, thank you. So the board had recommended a separate sort of nursery license for people that only wanted to operate in the, I'll just call it the starter phase. And that was rejected, I gather, and this is the compromise. Is that right?
I don't know if I can say whether it's a compromise or not. Maybe Bryn can. I can tell you that in this version of H701, under the category of retail license, there is not a nursery retail license. It is just one retail license, but retailers are able to, with this change and a few others, sell clones for cultivation and seeds.
Bryn, did you want to jump in?
Yep. So that Anthea's right. This is the definition of cannabis really would incorporate seeds. So the idea here was to be clear that retailers could also sell seeds and clones, and to amend that definition to make it clear that those would be for cultivation, not for personal use.
Okay, so if I wanted to just essentially set up a nursery, I would get a retailer's license, and I suppose I could sell final product. But no, because I couldn't. So if I wanted to run a nursery, could I get a retailer's license and then just sell clones? Or
Yes.
and
Yes.
seeds? Okay,
Yep, could do that. Mhm.
okay.
But the but they is the vision here that they'd have to, there's a bit of a starting problem, it strikes me, because this is, a retailer is a store selling products that are, food or flour or whatever. This is plants. These are live plants or seeds. And where would we expect them to have gotten those to begin with? Are they
So the bill also allows for cultivators to purchase and sell cannabis seeds and clones to other licensed cultivators. So I think that because the initial draft of 701 had our initial proposal included a retail nursery tier, we wanted to ensure that we didn't totally remove, and we removed that tier. We just got rid of the nursery level tier. And the idea was that we wanted retailers to still be able to sell them if they wanted to. We just removed the tier that would only allow a retailer to sell seeds and clones. But the bill in section 5 also allows cultivators to sell seeds and clones.
Okay, I should be patient. Thank you. And then one of you mentioned that these seeds and clones are only for sale for other licensed users, not personal use. Is that right?
That's
Or
true
did
of the cultivators, but the retailers provides that they can sell seeds and clones for cultivation. So they are not required to sell those clones to a licensee. They can sell them to an individual who wants to cultivate for personal use.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll get to that in section 5 and 6 when we see the change of what those
Okay.
license holders can do.
Any other questions so far? Okay, let's go on.
Okay, so that rounds out the amendments to the definition section. Section 3 deals with language in existing statute about what a local control commission can do. And because, as we'll see later on, this bill creates a concept, and I know that this is something that the House and Senate has had potential disagreement on the approach for how do municipalities get any of the fee or tax revenue. This has for every license application $100 additional that goes to the municipality, and that would be collected by the Cannabis Control Board and then distributed to the municipalities. The language that you see at the top of page 3 prohibits that local control commission, that municipality, from also assessing a fee for a local license. So it is all applicant licenses will generate an $100 fee that then goes to the municipality. And that is what municipalities get. They would not be able to have their own fee. I think at present, there's a little bit of ambiguity here, which is why I want to say it was S-152, but maybe it's 154, Senator White's bill with the revenue share.
Yeah.
Instead of the, but shall not assess a fee, her bill has, but shall not assess a fee over $140, I think it was. So you have seen in other bills amendments to this language, because this is where if a municipality could assess a fee, arguably this is where it would be, the authority would come from.
Okay, so everybody, the cultivator, the manufacturer, whatever is located in a town, $100 of their fee goes to the town? It's
Not
just
100. So it's every license holder. So the integrated license holder down to the smallest cultivator, and it's not $100 of the fee, it's $100 on top of the fee. So let's use the integrated licensee holder. You'll get to that later. That's an $100,000 per year fee. They'd actually be paying $100,000 plus $100. The lowest tier cultivator license is $750. They'd be paying $750 plus the $100 local licensing fee.
Okay, and if I had all three, the town would get $300.
Yeah.
Okay, so the town is not getting nothing, which I think is what, unless they had their own sales tax.
Correct. With the local.
And I guess, do they get to, no, don't they get to license, or do they just?
So
No.
This is the language that allows them 863B says that they can establish a cannabis control commission. They can issue and administer local licenses under this subsection for cannabis establishments within the municipality. But, and this is the language you see at the top of page 3, even if they do that, even if they do issue their own local control license, they can't assess a fee for that local control license.
Because you're already paying them $100.
Yep.
So if they want, and depending on what happens, if there's a bunch of thefts, as we had with hemp plants, and the local police are out patrolling all night, they can't assess an extra fee for that to the cultivator, because they've already gotten $100 from that cultivator through the state.
Yeah.
Okay. Senator Hardy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I don't know if this is for Anthea or Bryn, but that seems, the $100 flat fee just seems kind of strange to me. I mean, you just said that the lowest fee amount was $750 and the highest is $100,000. So that's seems very inequitable. Was a percentage considered? So like 10% of a fee, so it would be $75 for the low end and 10,000 for the high end. I mean, the integrated license, those are massive companies compared to the little individuals. I don't know, Bryn, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I can answer that. So during our work with our advisory committee, as we were developing the fee proposal, I think that I mentioned to this committee the last time I was here, we really had dozens of public meetings where we were talking about this fee proposal. And we never got any feedback from the municipalities that would justify any sort of higher fee based on the business type or anything else, which is why we ultimately recommended the $100 fee, because it was the only real justifiable expense that seemed to be there was the processing of the application. In our October 15th report, we did recommend to the legislature that municipalities should receive a portion, I think it was 1 to 2% of the excise tax revenue. But because we were putting forward a fee proposal that was supposed to be justified by the potential expenses, and we just did not hear any justifiable reason why those expenses would be higher based on a certain business type or based on anything else, that's why we came up with a recommendation of $100.
So with the idea that processing an application for a big one is just the same process for processing an application for a little one, essentially. I mean, that makes sense. It's just out of a percentage. It's a huge fee out of a percentage for one versus the other. That's just seems weird to me.
Well, I think, isn't $100 what a municipality gets for a liquor license? I thought there was some comparison going there.
I think it's
And
140.
we don't have enough information now to figure out if there's going to be additional cost. The municipality will also pick up additional grand list value and property tax. So that was it. And the fees were set to try and cover the cost of the board and administering this program. And right now, the fees aren't covering that cost, if I'm remembering correctly. But we're also running up against surrounding states having lower fees. And we aren't, the first to do it. When we started this 6 years ago, we would have been the first and could anticipate a much larger market. You don't have to travel here anymore, except maybe from New Hampshire. So the times have changed and the revenue forecasts are changing. And I think we can always adjust as we go. And if it turns out the towns are incurring additional expenses, we can make adjustments. If we, once we know how much we're going to sell, we will make adjustments. But this is new. Senator Pearson.
So I'm curious that, and this is actually from Act, whatever it was. So I realize that this is the status quo, but by letting a municipality, everyone should remember they've got to have an affirmative vote to allow a retail store, but they have, under our premise, no ability to preclude a processor or a grower from getting setting up an establishment. But here we are. I had forgotten that they are allowed to have this commission, which could administer a local control license. And so that seems to me that a municipality that didn't want to have any kind of cannabis business could set that up in a way that was guaranteed to fail for applicants. And I'm just curious what we've done to think that through, or if we are worried about that at all.
So I can jump in and speak to that. That was really one of the primary reasons why we recommended in the October 15th report that municipalities see a portion of the excise tax revenue. You're correct that municipalities have to opt in to host a retail establishment, but they are specifically not authorized to prevent another type of cannabis establishment from operating within their borders. So the board did very much grapple with what type of fee would be appropriate to both be justifiable to cover costs that were going to exist for the municipality, but also the board did consider that it may be a challenge for a municipality to not want to just leave that application on the desk and not process it if they weren't seeing revenue. So that was primarily the impetus for that recommendation.
I'm going to revert to what I told the folks in 188, and that is we're supposed to be looking at the taxing section. This committee has done nothing on cannabis policy. And I'm a little leery given the amount of changes we were asked to make yesterday to 188 to cannabis policy, to kind of opening the door to that. And so I'd like to keep us as close to possible to the taxes and fees, which is our domain. So
I appreciate that. And this is fee related here at top of page 3. It's shall not assess a fee. I wonder, given what you've just said, Madam Chair, I won't press my luck, but what if we had a 90-day default, just not, which doesn't guarantee somebody getting it, but if they don't take any action after 90 days, it would force the municipality to address it. Though presumably they could come up with reasons to reject it. I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that. I'd like to see some protection, because we just run into this sort of dynamic a lot, and it's unfortunate. Maybe it's just me.
you're worried about probably the cultivators as much as anything.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I never liked the affirmative vote from the municipality. I always thought it was fine to let a town opt out, but that was part of the compromise to get it across the finish line. But it was just about retail. And here we are, in the best of all possible worlds, we spread this economy all over the state, in particular for our rural towns. But some of our small towns are, by their nature, more conservative, and they may not embrace this. And I think that would be a shame. So
if I might, may I respond to
Yes,
Senator
please.
Pearson's concern? Okay. One thing that I should have mentioned is that in our final proposed Rule 2, we do have a directive from municipalities that provides that the board, first of all, the municipalities have to notify the board if they create a local control commission. But the board's not going to require local approval as a condition of an application unless the board has received notice from a municipality that they have created a local control commission. So that may alleviate some concern.
And this is one, we may just want to let it play out a little bit. If we do run into a problem, we can change the rules. Okay, Anthea, do you want to, since no one has to drive in this snow, I'm not going to hold myself to getting you out of here at 3:30 on stormy days. But I would like to get you out of here by 5 o'clock. So let's see if we can keep going through this.
Okay, section 4, this is another technical correction. when Act 164 was passed, the fees were originally going to be in section 909. When the integrated licensee was added, it didn't shift the number. So this is just changing a 909 to a 910.
Okay,
Section 5, this is dealing with what a cultivator can do. And this is the addition that is allowing at the top of page 4. A cultivator may purchase and sell cannabis seeds and clones to another licensed cultivator. So this was what Senator Pearson was asking about
Okay.
earlier. Section 6 is the language that allows the retailer, and it's just that one tier of retail licenses we'll see that would allow for the sale of cannabis also for cultivation, not just for consumption.
okay, so that's where the person that wanted to home grow a couple plants in the backyard could go buy their plants or seeds.
Correct.
Okay,
Okay, so now section 7, this is the addition of section 910, and this is where all of the fees are going to go. I can either walk through this language or I can switch over to the chart. I think it's easier to see in chart form, but I will take
yeah,
guidance from the committee.
let's do the chart.
Okay. That is not it. Okay, so what Faith has done is she's posted an updated chart, and this chart has more
Okay, You're
columns.
gonna have to make that a lot.
I'm gonna make it
bigger.
bigger. I wanted you to see what the whole chart looks like. The
It's a
two
big chart.
columns to the right, this is now showing what Bryn talked about in the beginning, where she was saying they had one of the CCB's proposals was to add some additional mixed cultivator tiers. That's what's highlighted in yellow and why there are 2 columns. But we're just gonna focus on this in bigger form over here. So the way the chart is laid out is you've got the license type, the statutory citation, a brief description, and then what the fee is. And these columns all reflect what is in H701 as it passed the House. And then when we get to the mixed cultivator tier, I'll show you the difference.
Okay,
So-
are these the same fees? Did the House make any adjustments?
The House did not make adjustments to the fee amounts, but they did say, give us a new proposal from the Cannabis Control Board. So there was proposal A, proposal B, this is now proposal C. And then within proposal C, they stripped out the nursery retail license.
Okay, they took out the nursery, but we're gonna add mixed cultivator in.
So the-
And, all right, and this proposal C, proposal B covered the cost of the Cannabis Control Board. Am I correct in that? And the necessary fees were higher. And then B brought it down to more closer to, or was A the first one that was just made us competitive with surrounding states. C or B came back and said, this is what the fees would have to be to cover the costs. And this is a hybrid that doesn't cover all the costs, but is closer than A.
That's correct. It's closer than
Okay.
B. You had it right the first time. So B was the one that was more aligned with other states, and C was kind of a hybrid of the two. Kept
Okay,
the lower tiers, the cost low for the lower tiers, gradually increased. So the higher tiers are more expensive.
okay, yeah, and our higher tiers are well above surrounding states. Is that?
Yes,
Am I
they are. And they're also,
Right.
the square footage is also typically smaller than the others.
Okay, so paying more for less, all right. What's the markup? All right, let's keep going.
Good.
I saw a hand. I can see everyone.
Well, I do have a question, but keep going if you're working your way through.
Should I continue or?
Yes, yeah, continue unless I can't see anyone in order to see this chart, so you'll have to holler. I'm not hearing anyone, so we'll keep going.
Okay, so for outdoor cultivator and indoor cultivator, there are 6 tiers within each. They go from lowest fee, lowest plant canopy to highest fee, highest plant canopy. The first one for the outdoor cultivator is the only one that is specified as a up to this amount of plant canopy or up to this amount of cannabis plants. The rest of them are all just based on square foot of plant canopy.
What is a plant canopy?
I'm going to let Bryn answer that one.
Canopy is something that hangs over my patio, and I don't think of these as trees. So what is a
Right.
plant canopy?
So plant canopy is actually a defined term in statute. And I'll pull it up for you. It
I knew it was
means
defined. I did not know what the definition was.
yeah. So it's the square footage that's dedicated to live plant production. So it doesn't include other areas like office space or something like that, but it does include area that is used for like breeding stock and young plants.
Okay,
Like
so
nursery
it's
stuff.
not the size of the plant, it's the
No,
square
it's the
footage.
square footage, yep, dedicated to growing
Okay.
the plants. But
But you're,
importantly, it also includes young plants and not just flowering plants.
okay, it doesn't include the space where you put your rakes and hose and all the rest of it. Okay, Senator Hardy.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Anthea, which chart are you looking at? I think it's different than the chart that's on our website because yours has yellow on it.
Yeah, if you hit refresh, Faith
Pardon me,
posted
it's-
it while we were talking.
Faith,
Yes, please refresh, Senator Hardy, you'll find it.
Thought I did refresh. It still says, is it draft 1.1, 22322 fee chart?
Yes.
is there anything on, did you add anything other than that highlighted area?
The only thing that's added is the highlighted.
Okay. So maybe we can,
I got it now.
you got it, yeah. Just takes sometimes to get caught up. Okay, now that we know what we're looking at, or let's go back to it.
Okay, so continuing to go through the outdoor cultivators, tier 1, it's the one that's got the two sort of qualifiers or ways to fall under. So it's up to 1,000 square feet of plant canopy or up to 125 cannabis plants. That's $750. It then escalates up from there exclusively with plant canopy. 2,500 square feet of plant canopy is going to be $1,875. 5,000 square feet of canopy, $4,000. 10,000 square feet of canopy, $8,000. 20,000, $18,000, and up to 37,500 is going to be 34,000. And the largest plant canopy amount for outdoor cultivator is larger than the largest for indoor. So while they both start at, as we'll see on the next line, at 1,000 square feet, it doesn't get as high for the indoor cultivator, and the fee starts higher and stays higher throughout. So for the indoor cultivators, it starts at 1,000 square feet of plant canopy, and that's a $1,500 fee. 2,500 square feet is a $3,750 fee. 5,000 square feet, it's going to be an $8,000 fee. 10,000 square feet is a $16,000 fee. 15,000 square feet would be a $36,000 fee, and then 2,500 square feet, or sorry, 25,000 square feet would be $75,000. No changes have been recommended from the Cannabis Control Board to this in their requests to you now. The next section, the mixed cultivators, this is where the two columns of the chart come into play. In the version that passed the House, there were 3 mixed cultivator tiers, and this allows for, at the same premise, to have outdoor based on number of plants and indoor based on plant canopy. This is in the new proposal, making some small changes to those ceilings and then adding 2 more mixed cultivator tiers. So I don't know if it helps for me to talk about the proposal or to talk about 701 as it passed. I'll move it over so you can see both at the same time. But you'll see in the
Over there, all right.
So in the new proposal, the lowest tier will have a larger number of plants that you can have, and the fee will be larger. And then the largest one in the new proposal is quite a bit higher than what was in the version that passed the House, with a higher fee as well.
Okay. And this is coming to us from the Cannabis Control Board as a their first ask, right?
Yes, this was what Bryn talked
Okay.
about in the beginning, and I see she has made herself visible, and I will stop the share. so
Okay,
you
yeah,
can see
Bryn,
her.
tell us why you've decided to do this.
Sure. So as I mentioned, the board has been was working on their administrative rules in January. The rules 1 and 2 are now with LCAR. So this was just sort of something that was developed a little bit later than the initial bill was drafted. So the mixed cultivation tiers really serve kind of two purposes. The committee will remember that you can only receive one of each license type. So a person couldn't, for example, get an indoor license and an indoor cultivation license and an outdoor cultivation license. So the idea with these mixed tiers was to first allow outdoor because the board has prioritized trying to encourage outdoor cultivation. So the first goal is really to allow outdoor cultivators some indoor area to keep their breeding stock under lights. And the second idea was to allow for a business model for small cultivators. As you remember, we are directed to prioritize and remove barriers for small cultivators. So to provide a business model that might be a little bit more sustainable for these folks. So to provide an indoor growing space. So people, when the outdoor season is over, they can essentially move inside and continue to grow inside. So that's the idea with the mixed tiering. And because there was such a strong interest from the public in these mixed tiers as we were developing our rules, the board decided to add some additional tiers that, and you'll notice that the indoor square footage is 1,000 square feet for all of them except for tier 2. And I can talk about why that is. But essentially, this is the goal here is to encourage outdoor cultivation and ensure that outdoor cultivators have an indoor space where they can keep their young stock under lights. Because pursuant to our rules, keeping even breeding stock under lights would be considered indoor cultivation. So the board wanted to provide these tiers as a way to encourage folks to grow outside and still have some indoor space to keep their breeding stock under lights. So the tier 2, you'll notice has a little bit bigger at 2,500 square feet of plant canopy indoors. And the idea there is to provide essentially some space to grow for small cultivators who are having some success with this indoor-outdoor model. So the idea there is for folks that are growing under that model to have some space to grow into a bigger business.
Okay, committee, Graham needs to leave. And Graham, you have posted a fiscal note. Any highlights we need to know?
For the record, Graham Campbell from the Joint Fiscal Office. I apologize that I do need to run at 4, but I have looked at the bill. So I've done a fiscal note as passed the House version of this bill. I haven't had the chance to look at the proposal for the Cannabis Control Board. So these numbers might be slightly different. But we estimate that this bill will raise $950,000 in fiscal year 23 and $1.4 million in fiscal year 24. And all these revenues will be deposited into the Cannabis Control, the Cannabis Regulation Fund. The only other thing I want to highlight for the committee is this amount of revenue raised from fees is not sufficient enough to cover the operating expenses of the Cannabis Control Board. As last I understood, their budget was in the $3 to $3.1 million range for fiscal year 23. And so you'd be looking at approximately a little over $2 million from some other source. So it could come from the excise tax, or it could come from a general fund appropriation. But as it sits, these fees will not be enough to fund the board, even in the out years. So I think I'll just sort of leave it at that. That's a consideration for potentially you all or for the Appropriations Committee about how they want to handle that deficit.
Okay. Any questions for Graham? No. Okay, Thank
Thank
you. And I think we've known that for a while. That's an appropriations issue. But there are the excise taxes that are also generated and could be used. They're going into the general fund and they could be circulated back if that's what the appropriations committee decides to do. Okay, Senator Pearson.
I'm wondering if, Bryn, if you're still listening, I'm trying to understand this, we don't have the nursery anymore. We've allowed retailers to sell to consumers, sell plants and seeds to consumers and to other cultivators.
Mm-hmm.
So, but where are they going to get them? Like what happens? How do we get this started? I've always been bothered by this sort of, well, we'll just look the other way a little longer and then it'll get started. So if if I have a license to grow, where do I get my seeds? Where do I legally get my seeds or my starters in round one here?
So every other state with an adult use cannabis market has managed to have this, have everything come to fruition. I understand that there are currently, as this committee well knows, there's currently people operating in the illicit market who have these seeds and young plants available. As the committee also knows, we are going to be, we are working on getting a seed to sale software up and running. That will probably take about a year for that process to be fully integrated. But it's, the question of where they're going to come from is likely the illicit market. And the idea here is to provide for cultivators to be able to cultivate these young stock and sell them to other licensees, and retailers to be able to sell these young stocks, so people who are cultivating at home can buy them from a licensee also. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to you or not.
It's an answer. Thank you.
It's our version of don't ask, don't tell. Okay, can we go back to the chart? Does anyone have any questions on the fees? Any problems with the fees? Are we okay with adding the mixed cultivator to the fees?
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
My only question was the $50 per employee. Is the board doing some kind of background check, or I thought we weren't doing that? And so just, could you help justify that?
Yes. So there are going to be requirements for employees, including some background checks and some educational requirements. All of this can be found in our proposed rules, which I'm happy to share with the committee. But yes, the board will be vetting employees before they can receive a card to work in a cannabis establishment.
I thought we want to hire people that maybe have criminal records from the war on drugs. So what's a background check looking for?
Yep. So the part of the board's rule, the portion of the rule that has to do with the background check does not prohibit a person who has a criminal history record, especially with drug-related offenses, from participating in the market. However, there is sort of an initial screen that if you have committed certain types of offenses that, for example, drug trafficking offenses, that would prohibit you initially, but the board has built in a review process, so that even though there's sort of an initial prohibition, the board can do some additional consideration and eventually allow that person to have a card if the board finds it appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Hardy.
I'm curious about the integrated license fee, because isn't the integrated license basically like you can do all of the above? Like they get to do all of the stuff? And they're the like really big companies that are going to come in at the beginning because they're already established. And so why don't we charge a higher fee for that? I mean, I know it's already higher, but why don't we charge an even higher fee? Especially since you need the money to support the Cannabis Control Board.
So the fees that are, so you're right that by statute, those integrated licenses can only go to, I think the statute provides that it's the existing dispensaries that are in good standing can seek an integrated license. You know, I don't think that, first of all, their statute also provides that any dispensary that seeks an integrated license prior to, I think it's October 15th, has to also pay $50,000 into the Cannabis Business Development Fund. So that would be on top of the $100,000 fee. And also the Cannabis Board has heard from some of the existing dispensaries that they may not wind up seeking an integrated license on the adult use market. So it's not clear that the Cannabis Business Development Fund will see $50,000 from each of the dispensaries.
So they may seek a different kind of license or just not get a license at all?
They may not. They may not wind up, not all of them may not seek an adult use integrated license.
Their fee is 25,000 now.
Yes.
So it's a pretty big jump.
Okay, and there's also competing. All right, is that it for the fees?
Yeah, that's the chart has everything on the fees for the commercial market.
Okay.
If you look at the very last line of the chart, you'll see, and Bryn mentioned this in her proposal, that intent to apply fee, the $500 fee, the Cannabis Control Board is proposing now that it lasts for 1 year, that it would then be the reduction from the one-time application fee. So that would be a change from H701. And then the last two sections of H701, and I'll go back to sharing the bill. Those are fee related in that one of the things the Act 164 did was, as we started off talking about this with how there's going to be chapters 35 and 37, it's moving the medical piece over to Title VII. And while it added language saying there shall be a fee, there shall be a fee, it didn't actually include those fees in Title VII. So sections 8 and 9 are just taking the fees as they exist. And Senator Pearson asked, what's the current fee for the dispensaries, and adding them to Title VII in conjunction with the language moving from Title 18 to Title VII. The effective dates have everything be effective on passage, but in the Budget Adjustment Act, there is through sections 59A and 59B supposed to be a delay in the repeal of the language in Title 18. So I think that you probably want to make sections 8 and 9 effective on July 1, 2022, not on passage. And then when you were talking about the Cannabis Control Board's third proposal, this is fee related with the language to have the waivers or the reductions. I can put up what that language is in the amendment, and that would be slotted in as section 911. So that's the last fee related piece.
You want to put up that?
Yep.
That language.
So Faith has posted under my name, it's H701 draft 1.1. It's the very first document. It looks like a normal instances of amendment. And I've highlighted in yellow what the changes would be from H701 as it passed. So striking out all of section 7, and instead section 7 would add sections 910 and 911. The changes you're going to see in 910 are the changes to the mixed cultivator tiers. You saw that in chart form. And then at the very end, you're going to see that 6 months changing to 1 year. And then it would be adding this new section, section 911, the fee waiver and reduction, social equity applicants, and it says that the Cannabis Control Board may, in its discretion and pursuant to adopted rule or readily accessible policy or both, reduce or waive cannabis establishment application and licensing fees for social equity applicants as defined by the board, but it's to include individuals from communities that historically have been disproportionately impacted by cannabis prohibition and individuals directly and personally impacted by cannabis prohibition. And that's taking the language from Act, I want to say it was 62 from last session, which directed the board to make the recommendation on waiving the fees or reducing them. So it's that same, these are what we're defining as social equity applicants. And as Bryn has mentioned, they're working on this in rule. I've seen the rules because they were before LCAR, and there are definitions for social equity applicants in the rule. And then the second instance of amendment would just be changing the effective dates, as we just talked about. But this is the big one, the social equity waiver.
Okay, committee discussion. Senator Hardy.
Can I just ask Bryn one more quick question? And the cultivator tier 2, you explained the 2,500 feet. Why is it 312 plants? That seems oddly specific.
Yes, so that's based on a ratio. All of those plant numbers, outdoor plant numbers, are based on a ratio. And that ratio is based on our outdoor cultivation. So the board has estimated that 1,000 square feet of cultivation space is equivalent to approximately 125 plants. So the idea is that they correspond to the outdoor cultivation tiers as you go up. So it's rather than having an outdoor cultivation square footage, we decided to use a plant count instead, because the board heard quite a bit of testimony that that cultivators have different methods of cultivation outdoors, and sometimes jamming your plants into a small area of square footage leads to problems with mold and things like that. Whereas if you can spread them out a little bit more than is necessary for like indoor cultivation space, then you have some more success. So the board decided to use a plant count instead of a canopy size, but those numbers correspond with the square footage area.
That makes sense. The other ones are just round, and this one, or to the 5 or the 0.
Oh, 312, yes. Because
312 is the only one that isn't, so it seemed odd. Thank you.
Yep. I actually think it was supposed to be 312 and a half that we rounded down there.
Oh, okay. That makes sense because it's 625.
Right. Don't ask me to do math right now, but yes.
Yeah. See, I noticed the
Okay.
math.
And Thea, what I found is draft 1.1 of 701. That's with the amendments included. But I think what you just showed us was the amendments. Would this be a strike all amendment?
No, it's two instances of amendment. It's striking out all of section 7 and replacing it with a new section 7, and it's striking out all of section 10 and replacing it with a new section 10. So it's two instances of amendment. This is different from what Faith had sent out earlier in the week, because I wasn't sure if you really were going to try and get it out this week with the board's proposals.
We're going to try, and I think we might actually make it. So I need, okay, so that is the motion to amend, right? This is section 7, and this is, all right. So what we need to do then, if we want to do this, is move to amend as presented in draft number 1.1.
Yep.
So moved.
Senator Pearson has moved that we amend H701, which is adding the mix, was doing some renumbering, it's adding the mixed cultivators and fees, and it is adding the ability of the board to adopt rules, reduce or waive fees to achieve the social equity requirements of the act. And I'm not, is it Act 62?
Yes.
Okay, is there any discussion? If not,
Senator Cummings?
yes.
My apologies, but you have a witness that wanted to speak to this bill that's
Oh,
with you now.
I'm sorry. Is that Nicholas?
Yes, hello. This is
Hello?
Nicholas Shorman.
Yes, okay, I'm sorry. It is late on Friday.
Not a worry.
Welcome. Okay, I can't see you. Are you on the phone or you, there you are. Okay. So just introduce yourself for the record and tell us who you represent. If
So
it's
for the
just
record,
yourself.
my name is Nicholas Shorman. I am the Executive Director of Vermont Normal. And I am here to speak to you today on an issue that Bryn raised and has been brought up in this committee today, which is waiving of license fees for social equity applicants. Now, I do have a testimony here written out, but it appears that in the moments before I was called upon that the committee was ready to vote on this. So, you know, I can give a somewhat abbreviated version of my testimony for the sake of time. Just quickly, I wanted to, again, just say, you know, I'm here to talk about H701, and that I'm here to propose that adding fee waivers for social equity applicants into the bill, as well as granting the CCB the authority to administer those waivers. So as been discussed, Vermont passed Act 164, setting up the recreational market in 2020. And behind that legalization bill were many historical and economic and social forces, but really two stand out as paramount. One of the driving forces behind legalization was to repair the harm done by cannabis prohibition, as well as the war on drugs to disproportionately impacted communities. The other force was to move as much of the illicit market, which as we know in Vermont is rather strong, into the recreational market as possible, and to have them engage with the recreational system as opposed to telling them to shut down, transfer from the illicit to the recreational market. So with this in mind, we view waiving waiving licensing fees for social equity applicants as a remedy that begins to chip away at both repairing the generational harm done from cannabis prohibition, as well as moving the illicit market into the recreational market. So quickly to explain why waiving license fees for social equity applicants addresses both of these aforementioned forces, it's important to understand the impacts that fee waivers can have. So as with any business, but especially with the cannabis business, startup capital is the make it or break it factor, as Senator Pearson alluded to earlier. Those who lack access to capital will find it virtually impossible to not only start a cannabis business, but successfully maintain one. A failed business of any kind, whether it be a cannabis business, a grocer, a leather, a shoe salesman, a failed business is the last thing we want to see in our communities. So by waiving licensing fees for social equity applicants, this would greatly ensure not only that these businesses successfully engage with the recreational market in a legal, safe, and economically fruitful way, but it also begins to repair the unjust and undue generational harm done by cannabis prohibition to social equity applicants. Now, while it is true to say that waiving fees would result in some portion of revenue loss, it does not begin to compare to the benefits it would serve a social equity-owned business and the state as a whole. So I want to say to the committee that instead of looking at this as a short-term loss, to look at it more as a long-term investment. A long-term investment into fostering a robust and sustainable and accessible cannabis community, as well as businesses in our communities, further adding to the foundation on which this strong state is built upon. You know, it's also noted that these fee waivers are on a sliding scale annually, which means they decrease by 25% every year, meaning by year 5, the business is paying the full cost of the fee. And I don't have to be here to tell you that 5 years in the grand scheme of things is not much. This is a market that is going to be around for a very long time. So we see that those 5 years as a small stepping stone into a much larger market. But it should also be noted, as Ms. Hare alluded to, that fee waivers are not just the sole opinion of Vermont Normal, but is the opinion of the Cannabis Control Board and the cannabis community as a whole. Waiving license fees for social equity applicants has been a cornerstone of the Cannabis Control Board's work. In building a recreational market from the ground up, the board has stated time and time again that waiving licensing fees on a sliding scale for social equity applicants is a crucial dimension to moving as much of the illicit market into the rec market, while also beginning to repair the harms done by cannabis prohibition. Additionally, the Cannabis Control Board has discussed with their discussions with Vermont Normal their desire to have the authority to do so. So this is not, again, this is not only the opinion of Vermont Normal, but the opinion of the board itself.
Can I ask you to please wrap it up? Because
of course, my
I
apologies.
think you've got the votes.
I think so too. The timing seemed a bit skewed on my end, but I think
I
you hear the
missed
message
you.
I'm
You were
trying to
blacked
say.
out in the bottom of the screen with all the staff, so I apologize for that. And I have the documents, not the agenda, on my other screen, so,
Of course. Well, thank
okay.
you for bearing with me.
Well,
I didn't
thank
have
you
the
for
words
bearing
down.
with us.
Of course.
Committee, any questions for Mr. Sherman? I'm not seeing any. I have a motion on the floor to amend H 701 as it came from the House with draft number 1.1. Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Oppose, say no. Okay, now I need a motion to approve draft 701 as amended. Senator Bray.
I move that we report favorably draft 701 as amended.
Senator Bray has moved that we report draft 701 favorably as amended. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. I'm seeing that as 700, right? No, yes, I've got everybody. Okay. Senator Pearson, would you like to report this one?
Is it the beard?
Okay.
Is it the beard, Madam Chair? Yes.
I think
I'd be
he's
glad to.
because probably the only one that knows what he's talking about.
Happy
If
to.
somebody asks a question other than fees.
Happy
Okay,
to. Anthea, please send me the your amendment when you have it.
and yeah, you may find out that they're closed down upstairs. They may be sending people home early because of the roads, and this may have to wait until Monday or Tuesday. We have one more bill on the agenda, which is the final draft of the insurance bill and genetic information. And do you know if Damien is still available, Faith?
He is, he's about to join us.
He is about to join us. Hopefully, this is just getting the final draft and we're ready to get this one out. I'm glad to see
Madam Chair, well,
finances. What? No, I was just gonna say, I'm glad to see finance is
waiting-
maintaining its reputation as to being able to knock bills out when we have to. Okay, yes,
Did we-
Senator.
Do we have an update on Senator Brock mentioned a couple times with the many phone calls we've been receiving, that when you call those numbers back, the folks that call us or we believed had called us are respond to us by saying, I don't believe we called you. That's the only objections I have heard. They've been the phone calls to opposing this bill. Do we have any more feedback on?
I
on that?
believe yesterday, the representative from the insurance company said she knew that her company had done some grassroots work, but she didn't know any details and would look into it. So Senator Brock, have you heard anything beyond that?
I did get a note back from Jill that she had gone back to her company and found that they had done some social media contacts and other attempts to get people to write. She was not those specific. She said that her understanding is they had about 65 people they'd contacted, but I alone got 109 identical emails. So that doesn't
Somebody's out there.
that doesn't cover that. I've got one of my interns I really assigned to do a little background and investigation to try to
Yeah.
to get to the bottom of this. And so hopefully after the break, I may have some more information.
I
I mean,
think
frankly, it just looks very suspicious.
yeah, I mean, we all get a lot of emails, maybe not 109 in one shot, but when you can't, there's no contact information for the
Right, it just has the
signer.
name and address, but it doesn't have email. You're not able to send an
Yeah.
email back. It doesn't have a phone number. So you got to track down the people. And of those people that I've tracked down, either 3 or 4 that I've been able to contact, none of them had any knowledge of this, or for that matter, of the subject matter at all.
And that's a first. And so, unless that's something we might want to refer to legal authorities.
They also were sending texts. I don't know if you guys got texts, and I've gotten the same call every day at the same time too.
Oh, well, I get calls every day at the same time, but I just assume it's my car warranty on my year-old car.
No, I think it's about insurance.
1219. And I also regularly get things about, as a realtor, I can get really cheap insurance, even though I've told them several times I'm not a realtor anymore. They come in several times.
Oh, thank us. Appreciate Senator Brock's looking into this.
Yeah.
And it's been troubling because it's kind of a new wrinkle on us. I'm prepared to go ahead and vote here.
So we're going to get back to what are we doing now? Damien and life insurance, which is connected to this discussion. Okay, and Damien, I think you were just doing a final draft. We gave you some time to put it together, and if you share that with us, hopefully we can get this one set.
Yeah. All right, so I just put it up on the screen. For the record, Damien Leonard, Legislative Counsel. So I ran this draft by Jill Rickard from ACLI, Jason Williams from UVM Medical Center, and Emily Brown from DFR. They've all said the language looks okay to them. Jill noted that her organization's objections to the bill continue, but that this addressed the immediate concern she'd raised the other day. So this version that I've pulled up has the changes highlighted. Faith also has a clean version if you vote this out today. So the first change here is the definition of genetic information. We've gotten rid of family medical history. We discussed this change the other day, and this is just how it'll appear. It's now a strike all amendment because we had to make changes throughout the bill. So rather than having several instances of amendment, I just made it a strike all.
Okay.
The next change here in 9334, this is adding the language that Jill requested the other day. So the genetic information of a member of an individual's family that may be associated with a potential genetic condition, but that has not resulted in a diagnosed condition in a family member. So again, if there's a diagnosed condition, so if it's diagnosed, it's part of family medical history. And this clarifies that that information can be used even if the diagnosis was the result of a genetic test, which was her concern there.
Okay, so if they had a genetic test, it said I had a proclivity to this kind of cancer. They went looking, they found the cancer, then that, or my mother or my sister or my brother, then once they found the disease, even if they went looking for it because of the genetic test, the disease that is then part of my family medical history, right? Or my medical.
Right. Exactly. So once it becomes part of your actual medical history, not just a predisposition that hasn't resulted in a diagnosed condition.
Okay.
The next change here in 3702 is adding the same language. 8 VSA 3702 is, oh, sorry. This is the life insurance provision here. So
yeah.
The provision above was insurance in general. This is just life insurance in this section. And so this is just adding that language for life insurance. The next change is in 4724, again, in Title 8. This is general unfair methods or unfair or deceptive acts in insurance. And again, we're going to add the language here for the genetic information of a member of the individual's family associated with a condition, but that has not resulted in a diagnosed condition.
Okay, and those are what's banned.
Yeah, exactly. And we're adding the same in language below with respect to the genetic testing section of the bill. So that section is kind of belts and suspenders. It addresses genetic testing separate from medical conditions and genetic information related to them.
Okay. Committee.
And then
oh, no,
the
you're not finished.
final change here is long-term care insurance, section 6, same exact language being added. So nothing to discuss there. It's just the same language. And that is it.
Okay, committee. Do we understand what we're doing? I think I do, yes. Are we ready for a motion to amend as presented in, let me bring it up here. That's draft 2.1. To amend.
Today's date?
Pardon?
Is that today's date?
I've got draft 2.1 2/24/22. Is that right, Damien?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, yesterday at 2:20 p.m. is when the draft is timestamped.
And it is posted on our website. So I need a motion to amend S247 as as highlighted in there.
So moved, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Senator Hardy has moved that we amend as presented in draft 2.1. Is there further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, I'm seeing we have amended I have still got Senator Sirotkin. 700. I now need a motion to approve the bill as amended.
Sure, so moved.
Senator Hardy has moved. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Hearing no nos, I'm going to call that 700. It passes as amended. And Senator Hardy, would you like to, or Senator Brock?
Senator Hardy can report. I just was going to just comment that all of those letters that we got to tell us to vote no were probably a false flag operation by the people who wanted us to vote yes, and that conspiracy worked.
It was a Democratic plot.
Reverse psychology. I'm happy to
Okay.
report it. Damien, I'm gonna
Okay.
need your help though.
And you may find out you can't get it upstairs till Monday, but
Okay,
so you
well, I
just
can
have-
email it. I don't
yeah,
have to run
Damien,
upstairs.
they may have sent folks home. So,
Yeah, and
okay,
I'm
so
not
we
at the
can go
State
off
House
live.
anymore
We
anyway.
are done our work for the day.
Woo-hoo, we